addressing payment and contract terms as early as possible in the conversation process, I think is going to be so important. Among freelancers doing similar types of work, the expected pay rate can vary so drastically. This conversation becomes really important for both sides just to not waste anyone's time. A lot of freelancers are also way less flexible when it comes to their rate than maybe someone who is going to be hired for a full-time role would be, because they're not getting benefits.
Initiating becoming a hiring machine sequence in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everyone, it's Sam Keenley, and welcome to Becoming a Hiring Machine. This is the show dedicated to fixing recruitment by going beyond saying what needs to change and instead teaches you how to make that change. Today, we've got a great trending topics episode ahead of us, but before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little bit about the show. Essentially, we have shows within the show here. Some days we have interviews with industry thought leaders and others who are shaking up the space, while other days like today, we cover trending topics. Stop by every Tuesday for a Tactical Tuesday episode where we go deep on how to do something that's going to help you drive better results in your day-to-day. Some days we open up for Q&A, and occasionally you get a mic drop episode from Matt where he shares something that he's been thinking about within the recruitment space and wants you to know. Now, as a reminder, if you like the content that we share here on the show, make sure that you subscribe for more. All right, fun fact. McKinsey found that over the past 8 years, there has been a 25% increase in the number of employed U.S. workers identifying as independent workers. So this is growing from 27% in 2016 to 36% in 2024. Building off of that, Ripple, an on-demand talent platform, shared a report this year highlighting that 92% of the companies that participated in the study indicated that they plan to increase their use of freelancers in 2024 and beyond. So what does this rising age of the freelancer mean for the recruitment space? That's what we're going to unpack today in today's Trending Topics episode with your favorite co-host, Lex. Lex, welcome back.
Happy to be here and excited to be talking about freelancing. This is something that hits close to home for me. I've been a freelancer at various points in my career, so I'm excited to talk about some of the challenges that are being presented, but then also some of the opportunities for recruiters and for candidates. So I think this is going to be an interesting conversation.
Perfect. Okay, so I know I shared a couple fun facts to tee this up. Do you have a little bit more background you can give us for this?
Yeah, I'll give some context just to kind of paint a picture of where we've been and where we are now. So times of economic turmoil and economic downturns generally lead to some form of workforce innovation. And the recent trend of the increase in freelancing is definitely a result of some of that uncertainty that we've been experiencing in the past couple of years. Freelancing has always been kind of like this on the side type of thing, but in the past 3 years especially, we've seen an increase of people becoming full-time freelancers, and that, you know, the rise of the gig economy, we've talked about this in the past, and honestly, this is one, when we go back to our 2024 predictions, we talked a lot about the rise of fractional talent, you know, even in the C-suite. So this is one of those predictions that we're definitely starting to see become validated by the data over the past few months, and I think by the end of this year, we'll have even more data that validates this even further. So this is something that I think there are benefits, there are pros and cons for both companies and talent on both sides. So for companies, there's a little bit of flexibility in terms of, okay, we know that we need help with XYZ. We don't know if we need ongoing help. We don't know if this justifies a full-time hire, a salaried position, but we cannot ask our current staff to jump into these things, or we have a highly niche, very specialized thing that we need to get done and we need to hire someone for that. Freelancing is an amazing opportunity in that regard. And for talent, this is a really interesting opportunity to do more of what you want to do and less of what you don't. When you're freelancing, you have a very, very highly specialized skill set that you're offering to companies. And you are able to kind of just control what type of work you do, what type of work you don't. And it gives you also just general flexibility in terms of where you work, how you work, and who you work with. So there's flexibility on both sides. And I think that there are some obvious, benefits to that, but then it also does become a little bit of a challenge. So that's kind of the context.
Okay. My head's already going to opportunities for recruiters, but I don't want to get into that yet. I know that we're going to eventually.
There's a flow here, Sam.
Rein me in. Keep me on flow before my monkey mind just goes straight down this hole.
I am a cynic, so I like to start with the challenges just so that we can get them out of the way, because my mind instantly goes to, okay, there's a lot of complications here. There's a lot of gray area. There's a lot of ways that we could get this wrong. And so for me, I think like I like to tackle the challenges first, and then we can come out on the other side and talk through all of the opportunities and all of the ways that we can make good on this.
Okay, deal.
I'm a buzzkill. So when it comes to the challenges around an increasingly freelance workforce, one, from a recruiter's point of view, I think just it changes the way that we hire in general. This opens the door to a totally new way of doing the job. And so I think that it almost requires a little bit of that: take what you know works, and take what you're really good at, and then start to apply it in almost thinking through a new segment, a new industry. You're working with a totally different subset of talent. So I think one of the biggest challenges is just standardization. When you're thinking about hiring a freelancer to work for a company that also has full-time hires, it has salaried employees, how does this freelance hire fit into the equation, fit into the culture, fit into what has already been established at this company? That, I think, is one of the trickiest things. And having been a freelancer in the past, you aren't generally privy to as much context as full-time employees are. It makes sense, but it's a challenge for that person being able to do their job and to be able to be successful. And so in the past couple of years, as more and more people have started becoming serious about freelancing, freelancers have started to take some of that power back and say, I won't work for you if I don't believe that I can be successful in this role. And so I need access to the same level of information and the same level of context and the same culture that you're giving your full-time employees. So that opens like an interesting can of worms there, because there is that give and take. This is a more transactional relationship. It doesn't have those strong ties. So there's some trepidation on the company or the hiring team's side to kind of say, do we really open the doors and, give you the keys to the kingdom in the same way that we do our full-time staff?
Yeah. I think part of that also comes back to just looking back on when I've been in-house. A lot of the freelancers that we did bring on were for transactional work, for just not menial tasks, but just things that we didn't have time for, people that had the expertise. It was very much, we know what to do, we just can't do it for whatever reason it is. Whereas now I think a big chunk of that 25% growth has been freelancing for strategy, for vision, for those types of things. And before, you could get away with not having a chat because they don't need to know that information. You already have the strategy and vision for it. But now, as you're asking these people to come in, they have to have that. And that's where I think that awkward dance, like you said, comes in, because, well, they can't give you good recommendations or get the desired result if they're missing half the picture.
Totally. And for recruiters, you're playing that role of the middleman, as you often find yourself doing. And so you're kind of stuck in this position of advocating for the freelancer and knowing that it doesn't make sense for them to take a role that they cannot demonstrate their truest abilities. But then you also are advocating for the hiring team and understanding, okay, especially if this is a candidate that you haven't interacted with in the past, like I can only vouch for them so far. So how do you kind of manage that? I think that's one of the challenges that we're going to start see popping up here and there, and start to see people kind of wondering, hey, how do I manage this? This is a lot to handle. The next piece of it, and it kind of ties into that, is just consistency. One, you're dealing with potentially higher rates of turnover. Again, there's less loyalty. So freelancers aren't tied. There's maybe a contract. Maybe that contract is based out in a period of time. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's based on deliverables. You don't have any assurance that that freelancer in 6 months, when you need someone to do similar work again, is going to be available, is going to be interested. You're starting to run into a little bit of that challenge as well, where, okay, maybe for a very similar role at the same exact company, you're having to hire and, place someone in this again and again and again and again. And so that becomes a little bit of a challenge as well. And maybe the quality of talent or the skills delivered from each of these candidates, each of these freelancers, is not consistent. It's not the same. And so how do you really maintain a strong relationship with those core like A players and, start to utilize them as often as possible?
Yeah. And I think that's the trade-off gamble that you make if you say you don't want to hire a full-time employee, that's what you get with a freelancer. You can set up your contract for a certain amount of time, for certain projects, certain hours per month, but they're probably taking on other work because if this is their main thing. So that's a really hard problem to solve for. And I think that's something that just comes back to, I've seen a lot of people go, what is it, like contract to hire type roles. You can set it up that way. I've talked about that before, or it's budget constrained, something else. But yeah, I think there's no right answer, right way. But I think that is something as a recruiter that would be a phenomenal, like, what are the second and third order effects of us going this route? Being able to lay that out for the hiring organization to think about and get ahead of.
Totally. And that leads me to my third challenge, which is just forecasting need. I think that this is a really cool opportunity we talk about this all the time, recruiters to position themselves as strategic partners, strategic advisors, people who are in the weeds of the data, noticing trends, noticing, hey, you guys every 6 months seem to need someone to do XYZ. How do we kind of start to build a pipeline to get us to the place that we need to be, where we're kind of utilizing the right people at the right time? So I think that is something. A lot of times in-house teams, they're thinking on a quarterly basis. They're not necessarily thinking super far ahead because they have the talent in-house. It's just a matter of utilization. When you're starting to outsource that talent based on specific needs, specific initiatives, specific projects, you need to think a little bit further out, start to zoom out a bit and say, who are we going to need here in 3 months, 6 months, a year, and start to think that through, especially when you're engaging, you're hiring for these roles, you're having to kind of constantly keep that pipeline strong and having conversations that will fill it, in perpetuity. So I think that is something that especially in-house teams are going to have to shift that mindset a little bit of, it's not about utilizing the talent that you have. It's about finding someone who is very specifically suited to do a specific task, strategically, help with X, Y, or Z. And when are you going to need them and for how long?
Mm-hmm. This gets so interesting to me because I'm already thinking about, whether you're an in-house recruiter or if you're an agency and you operate a little bit more like an RPO where you have that in-depth knowledge and also the ability to look beyond, like you said, a quarter. If you're partnering with an organization that has a rev ops, a sales ops leader, especially like finance, and they know what are growth goals, what are current bottlenecks, where we just resource deficient, that's where you become a true strategic advisor. Like hands down 100%. If you can operate at that level, completely different dynamic to how you're viewed and valued within those clients that you work with.
100%. This honestly, to me, the rise of the freelancer in general is such an opportunity for recruiters because I just honestly don't think that in-house teams have the resources, have the knowledge, have the time to be able to manage talent in this way, in this new way. It's time intensive. It requires an understanding of how each of these specific roles works, what kind of timelines they're working with, what the typical pay rates are. You have to have a really good understanding of the role itself in order to hire for it on a freelance capacity. And so I think that is something that recruiters can really position themselves well if they niche down, or even honestly just within a specific subset of types of roles, have a really good understanding of, each of these different needs and how they can kind of deliver on that. Okay, so now we are at your favorite part, finally, which is what this means for recruiters, some of the opportunities, and then also just some ways of shifting the way that you think a little bit about your recruitment strategy in general in order to accommodate an increase in freelance talent. So I'm going to just kind of go down a list and we can chat through each one. And I'd love to hear your thoughts, especially since you're excited about this section in particular, about some of these shifts in just mentality, mindset, etc. So the first thing that comes to mind for me as just kind of an opportunity is, again, beginning to focus on specialized skills. For freelance roles, especially, recruiters should start zeroing in on candidate skill sets and project portfolios. So being a little bit more attuned to what have they done in the past? What can I kind of use to build a case for this freelancer? It's a little bit less about the culture connection and does this person fit here well? That still matters, but it doesn't matter as much as when it's a full-time role. So thinking more through strategically positioning this candidate based on their skill set, I think that's a really, really important thing. And then considering the fact that freelancers also generally work independently, making sure that you have a really good read on reliability, looking at their track record as far as what they've delivered in the past in that regard as well is really crucial. Time management, communication skills. Is this person a self-starter? Can they handle this and just jump right in on their own? So again, it's like highly specialized niche skills. You want to kind of look for that. And then you also want to look for experience level, track record, and their ability to really grasp what they're doing without needing a ton of handholding. This is not an area where you want to take that personality-based hiring approach and, hey, they'll figure it out as they go. No, this is the time for this person can deliver value day one.
Mm-hmm. So as you're saying this, it makes me think about, I have a little stick with the reference process. In traditional like full-time employee hiring, you're cherry picking like, okay, who's the manager that loved me the most? Who's the direct report that I work with that's only going to sing her praises? I'm just like, what's the point of taking the call? You know that the person that they put on there is only going to say good things. Where you don't see it ever really used that much as freelancers. And that's the one where it's like, I would much rather speak to someone who's used this freelancer because they're also not tied to them. They're not getting anything out of it. Like, how did they communicate? How were they with timelines? Like, to me, this is a no-brainer here where as a recruiter, like go find out, like look at their portfolio, find out who those clients were, and then get some background on them. I think that's going to be so much more reliable and a good point to use your spells, especially if you're in between the hiring organization and that freelancer. If you're putting your reputation on the line with it, that's absolutely a step that I'm incorporating here.
100%. And I've started to notice more freelancers having case studies on their own websites, on their personal, not just a couple of quotes here and there, but a full in-depth case study of similar to how an agency would approach it. This is what the ask was. Here's how I delivered it. And here's, what the results were. So that's definitely something that you can, as a recruiter, request like deeper insights into how this person works and what the results generally are. This is also a really interesting case for freelance networks. Ripple, that you mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, they're a freelance network for marketers. So another one we've talked about in the past, Marketer Hire. There are a ton of these different networks that have various types of talent that you can tap into and almost rent from this company. And they've got reviews. You can review them yourself. So there's a little bit more of that vetting process and crowdsourcing. So that, I think, is a really powerful tool for recruiters as well, is whether you use them through the network or not, understanding what is the general consensus around this person and their ability to deliver on this highly specific need or skill set.
Yeah, fully with you there.
So the next thing kind of goes along with that, which is just creating your own talent pools. So yes, there are these networks that you can tap into, but you should also have this focus on building your own network of go-to freelancers for recurring projects or for other jobs that you're working. So the really great thing about freelancers is once you place a freelancer in one role, if you're hiring for similar types of roles at other companies, you already know that this person, I just had them for a 3-month contract at this place. In 3 months, they're fair game for me to kind of place again. And so there is a little bit of that recurring element here of, yes, if you are a good steward of this relationship, you really manage it well, you can leverage that. And it's really beneficial moving forward. So it does open the door for a little bit more of that when we start to think through building a true talent network and a true talent pool that you can tap into at any given time, which I think is pretty cool.
Yeah, that one to me is the biggest no-brainer. And even a handful of episodes ago with Will Spangler and Francis Larson, they were talking about this, where it's like, why sell a one-time asset when you can hold on to that and keep, like you said, like keep running it out, keep making recurring revenue off of it. And also you can continue to raise the bar of your current talent pool. It's like, and that's less work for you over time as it is more vetted, as you're doing it more properly. Like all these steps are just getting shorter down, where it's like, oh, you need this type of role, you need someone with experience in this industry, go pop into your CRM, you've got it all labeled. And then if you are working with them, whether exclusively or not, but you're just keeping in touch, you should understand what's their current bandwidth. Are they in the middle of something that they can't take time with? Or it's like, oh, I know they can spare at least a few hours a week, a month, whatever it is. So yeah, to me, like that is one of the biggest opportunities, especially in this time of why not try to make your revenue a little bit more consistent, reliable, like you're saying.
Yeah. And I think there is that symbiotic relationship that you're talking about of, okay, this is beneficial for both the freelancer and the recruiter. And you as the recruiter can start to build your own case studies around this specific candidate, and starting to think through strategically, how do I position this candidate for other roles like this one? And so I think that there's just a lot of really interesting creative opportunities within that. And it all comes back to what we say time and time again, but having that long-term strategic focus, building long-term relationships, and really just nurturing that over time, and understanding, again, you're having conversations early on that give you an understanding of where this freelancer wants to go, similar to how you would with any other candidate. And that helps position you better for, how am I going to work with this person moving forward? I know what I'm going to place them in today, but in 6 months' time, what does that look like? So I think there's, again, just so much opportunity within that specifically. And that brings me to the next kind of just strategic shift, is just kind of adjusting your interview process and questions a little bit to account for the nuances here. And so I think, again, really focusing in on skills and just proven value adds, and having a really good grip on, especially if this is your first time talking with a candidate, a freelance candidate, really understanding, okay, can they do the job? But then I also think, again, balancing that with that long-term approach of, okay, maybe they're not the best fit for this current placement, but I know what they're working with, and I can think ahead and start to, understand where they fit into the puzzle later on. So simple, but adjusting your goals in the interview process a little bit, I think, can be a big, big, big game changer when we start thinking about freelance talent. The next one that comes to mind, and this is, I think, one that's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out, is payment. Addressing payment and contract terms as early as possible in the conversation process, I think, is going to be so important. One thing that I've noticed is, among freelancers doing similar types of work, the expected pay rate can vary so drastically, way more drastically than we see across roles, full-time hire roles. You have a good understanding generally of okay, I know what to expect. Here, it is a no man's land. There are equally talented freelancers charging wildly different rates. And so this conversation becomes really important for both sides, just to not waste anyone's time. A lot of freelancers are also way less flexible when it comes to their rate than maybe someone who is going to be hired for a full-time role would be, because they're not getting benefits. They're not getting any of these overhead benefits out of the arrangement. So the only thing that they care about is, am I getting paid X amount per deliverable or per hour? And so you have a little bit less to work with there often when you're working with freelancers than when you are working with a full-time hire.
Mm-hmm. One thing I've seen go really well for this is when you have the agency operate like the employer of record, and as you build out your CRM, as you have this book of freelancers, you can right size that. So say you have a certain skill set, call it marketer. You've got junior, manager, senior. You can come up with kind of your tiers, and then as you're working with these organizations, you can say, hey, what do you need? What level? What job to be done? All that, and then based on your knowledge, that's where you can come in and recommend it. It makes it easier for yourself. That becomes a huge value add to the hiring organization, because they're just like, am I supposed to pay this? I've seen people asking for $5 an hour. I've seen people asking for $500 an hour. I don't know, and that's where you can come in and be like, perfect. That's exactly what we're solving for. We've done this work. We've started to layer out this based on, their experiences, their skill set, and everything else. And we've done that work for you and can tell you, here's the fair market value. And I have people already who match these different things depending on what it is that you need.
I love it. Yeah, I think that there's so much opportunity to leverage your own research, data, and findings to just position yourself, again, as that strategic partner who's like, yeah, this is confusing to navigate. We've started to do that dirty work for you, and here's what I recommend. And I think just building that trusted authority presence is so powerful. And yeah, I think when it comes to timelines, an understanding of what is fair or reasonable within a specific timeline, this is where you can start to, again, become that strategic partner so that you're making sure that this is a successful arrangement for the client, for the freelancer, and for yourself. So there is so much opportunity to leverage expertise, especially when you're working with freelance talent. And so I think, again, yeah, I love that point. I think there's so much room there for recruiters to just shine. So the final opportunity slash just thing to be aware of is, I think, turn times when it comes to freelancing are so much faster. It's faster onboarding. Again, this is a position where generally you want this person day one to be delivering value. So they're going to need to get up to speed very quickly. There's a little bit more of that context and like that info sharing happening before they're even in the seat. In my opinion, this is an area where you can start to make very clear, this is exactly what we want from you out of this arrangement before they're hired, before they're placed. So I think just one, making sure that you're fully aware of all of the tools that this person is going to need access to in order to be successful, all of the people that they're going to be interacting with, etc. Making sure that that infrastructure is built and that you as the recruiter are supporting that and are kind of being the ramp for this person, jumping in day one, being ready to go. That becomes a little bit more of a consideration in a freelance role than it does for a full-time hire who's going to kind of go through that extended onboarding experience. This is kind of like, hey, we're throwing you into the fire, figure it out, and you have to make it as easy as possible on them in order to make this a successful arrangement. Mm-hmm. Because by the end of week one, you want to be able to say, okay, this is clear that this person is in the right place and they're going to be able to do what we want them to do.
Yeah, I love that. And even just thinking about if you're an agency or an RPO that does really start to focus on this, if you want to be successful, you're going to need to niche down probably into a couple key roles, functions, job to be done. So you'll also be able to prepare a playbook checklist for like, I know that for this specific role, for this specific project, they're going to need access to these tools, to these people, to this information. And you can get ahead of that with the hiring organization. So on day one, it's not, all right, let's get started, go meet the crew and have your pizza party. But it's like, here's what they need. You can give them access before they even start. So they've got that. They've been debriefed. Like you said, I mean, even if it's you, the recruiter, just like, this is actually part of my onboarding experience with them. It's not on your dollar. I spend the first week with them between their start date and when we've signed this contract, where I'm just going to make sure that they have everything that they need. They have the background knowledge so that on day one, they're doing work. They're not reading. They're not trying to catch up.
Exactly. And I think you raise a really good point too. In this type of arrangement, those follow-ups and that relationship maintenance, checking in on a bi-weekly basis to see, hey, how's it going? Are you feeling like you have everything you need to be successful? Are you feeling like you're delivering value here? That stuff becomes so much more important because, again, it's data for you that you can take with you to either work with this candidate again or work with this client again, etc. So having that check-in type of mentality is really, really important when you're working with freelancers, because rather than, oh, in 3 years, I might place this candidate again, it's like, no, in 3 months, I might, or in 3 months, I might be working on a very similar type of role and I can learn a lot from what went well and what didn't in this one to help guide that moving forward. So having that flexibility and that kind of idea of, all right, it's going to take some figuring out, but I'm open to receiving as much data as possible to help me get there. I think that is going to be the biggest strength that a recruiter can have in a freelance economy.
Yeah, I couldn't have said it better. So, chef's kiss. Perfect. Anything following on this, or is that kind of the...
No, that's it. I think it's just one of those things where, again, we're going to see how this plays out. But ultimately, I think there's a lot of opportunity here. And I also think that recruiters who are interested in starting to work more with freelance talent, just have patience with yourself as you're figuring out all of these nuances. There's a lot of changes, but you know how to do the job. It's just a matter of applying those skills to a new way of doing the job. And I think that, it's fun to think about all of the ways that this could play out.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. Well, this is a fun conversation. I like this topic and just think like, there are different ways of solving similar types of problems, just new variables in the mix.
And I think ultimately it's about adapting. Exactly. This is kind of the direction that it seems like the market is heading in. So how do you start to put feelers out there to understand and adapt to this new way of working and this new way of finding talent?
I love it. Well, Lex, appreciate you as always for coming with just the best topics. They're always good thought starters, things to stimulate. So hopefully some recruiters who listen into this are thinking differently about not just this current market, but what does this mean for my business? What can we do with it and take something that is viewed as like an unknown uncertainty to an opportunity. And I think that's where the power lies. So, all right, well, as we wrap, Becoming a Hiring Machine is a production of Loxo. If you like this episode, but you're not sure where to go next, we've got a link to a similar one, and you can find those in the show notes of the description of your favorite podcast streaming platform, as well as on our website. Full video episodes are available on YouTube as well. And if you ever have questions for us, send them to us at podcast@loxo.co. Last request, if you did enjoy this episode, please make sure to leave us a quick rating in your podcast streaming platform. It only takes you 3 seconds, but it's going to help other recruiters like you to find us. So, all right, everyone, that's the show. That was a great Trending Topics episode with Lex. Until next time, bye all.